We continue, we're reading the book of Divrei Hayamim Bet, the story of King Asa. We read the other day that Asa was a great king, and we continue with the story, chapter 15. Va'azaryahu ben Odeid haita alav ruach Elohim. The Spirit of God came upon Azariah, the son of Oded. Vayetze lifnai Asa, vayomer lo, Shima'uni Asa v'chol Yehuda u'Vinyamin, Adonai imachem, biyotchem imo v'im tidreshuhu, yimatzeh lachem, v'im ta'azvuhu, ya'azovachem. He said, listen to me, Asa, and all the people of Yehuda and Binyamin. God is with you as long as you're with him. If you turn to God, he will respond to you. But if you forsake God, then God will forsake you. Right? Very classical sort of understanding of biblical theology. If you're with God, then God is with you. And if you're not with God, then God is then God will not be with you. Okay? So he says, V'yamim rabim liYisrael, lelo Elohei Hamet, ulelo Kohen Moreh, ulelo Torah. And it was many years that Israel had gone without a true God, without a priest to give instruction, and without teaching. It had been a bad time. So Azariah comes in and he's saying, and presumably, right, we had already heard in the previous chapter about Asa, and we'd already heard that Asa was a great king. So this is probably a little bit of going back in time. And in fact, if you look back at the opening chapter, there's something, I don't remember if we discussed it during a recording or only afterwards, right? But we definitely talked about this not too long ago, that generally the way that Tanakh works when it's telling a story is that we do what's called the Vav HaHipuch, like in verse 2. Vayetze lifnei Asa, vayomer lo, right? You see here the Vavs. In verse 3, V'yamim rabim. In verse 4, Vayashav bitzar lo, right? That's usually we do a verb followed by a noun. At times we have a noun followed by a verb. That's how chapter 15 begins. The Spirit of God came upon Azariah, son of Oded, is the English I have here. To me, it doesn't sound like a very good translation. It should probably be the Spirit of God had come upon Azariah, son of Oded. Meaning this probably was something that happened early on in Asa's life. Asa's father was an idolater. His grandfather was an idolater. His great-grandfather was Shlomo. If I'm getting my generations correct, his great-great-grandfather or Rechavim wasn't a full idolater, was David. So at this point in time, things had already degraded. Azariah ben Oded gets this prophecy and had come to Asa with the following things that were said. And the previous chapter, which already told us about how Asa was a good king, probably occurred before this. Okay, so now we see that again. I remember we talked about a few weeks ago about the verb noun versus the noun verb. And so here he came in front of Asa and he said to Asa, right, listen to me, things have not been good. Right? We don't have proper Torah, means instruction. We saw a lot about that in the book of Mishlei. We don't have a Kohen. We don't have people who are leading us properly. But in distress, what happens? We returned to the Lord, the God of Israel, and we looked for him, and God responded to us. At that time, there was no peace. Right, nobody was safe traveling from one city to the next. There was tumult. There were robbers on the street. It was dangerous. The enemies. V'chutitu goy begoy v'ir be'ir ki Elohim hamamam b'chol tzara. Nation was crushed by nation and city by city, for God threw them into panic with every kind of trouble. V'atem chizku v'al yirpu yedechem ki yesh sachar lepulatchem. As for you, be strong, do not be disheartened, for there is reward for your labor. By the way, this verse 6, I don't know if you're familiar with the words in Hebrew. V'chititu is a very famous word in the Tanakh from the book of Yeshaya. It is the word that's used for the destroying, taking your swords and turning them into pruning shears and the like. The book of Isaiah, what's on the walls there opposite the United Nations, uses that words. V'chititu charbotechem, I think is the exact words. And so right here, Azariah comes and he tells to Asa, remove the idols, right? That's what he's saying too. You need to have good instruction. You need to have good worshiping of God. That's what we have here. And I should say, if you're saying, I remember the reign of Asa back when we learned it in the book of Melachim, which kudos to you if you remember it. This is not mentioned. We don't have this. We have Asa as a great king, a great religious leader, but we don't have these verses, this story of a prophet, Azariah, the son of Oded, and coming to Asa and inspiring Asa's reform is not mentioned at all. There's no mention of this part of the Asa story. So he comes and he says to Asa, right, things have been bad, but now you need to be strong. You need to, right? Ukishmoa Asa dvarim ha'ele in verse 8 in Pasuk Chet, v'anavua Oded hanavi hitchazak v'ya'aver hashikutzim mikol eretz Yudo v'nyaminu me'arim asher lakan me'ar Ephraim v'chadesh et mizbach Adonai asher lefnei ulam Adonai. So when Asa heard these words, when he hears the prophecy from of Oded. Here it says of Oded. When we started the chapter, it said Azaryahu ben Oded, but okay. So maybe it was a father and son tag team, or words fell out here. He hears this prophecy. What does he do? He goes and he's courageous and he takes action and he gets rid of all of the idolatry, the abominations from the lands of Yehuda and from Binyamin. He goes up onto the hills of Ephraim, where he was a successful king militarily. So they had also conquered some territory of the northern kingdom in the hills of Ephraim, and he makes like a Chanukat HaMizbeach. He goes and he restores the altar of God to its place. Vayikbotz in verse 9, Pasuk 10, Ekol Yudav V'Yamin V'Agarim Imahem Ephraim Menashe Mishimon Ki Naflu Alav Yisrael Lerov Berotam Ki Adonai Elohav Imo. He assembles all the people of Yehuda and Binyamin, of Ephraim, Menashe, Shimon, right? So some of the other people, we learned about this earlier. There were some people who were from the northern tribes who wanted to remain in relationship with the God of Israel, who left the territory of Yeravam. Yeravam put up guards to try to avoid it, to try to break the tie between the northern kingdom and the Beit Hamikdash. Okay, so many, as we're told, because many of the people had come back to the southern kingdom, Vaikbitsu. So all those people, and again, what it's trying to do in those verses is to say that even after the revolt, even after the rebellion, here we have Asa, we have his religious reform, and his kingdom is bigger. His kingdom has people from the northern kingdom in it, again, propping up the Beit HaMikdash, propping up the Davidic dynasty, to prop up these people in the beginning, the early parts of the Second Temple period. So in verse 10, so in the 15th year of the reign of Asa, in the third month, which is the month that we call Sivan, presumably, the month at which we celebrate Chag HaShavuot. We remember the giving of the, quote-unquote, the Torah, the Aseret HaDibrot, the revelation at Sinai. Vayizbechu Adonai bayamahu min hashalal heviu bakar shva me'ot v'tzon shivat alafim. So he's no Shlomo. They only bring 700 oxen and 7,000 sheep of spoil from what they had gained in victories, presumably demonstrating that they have an understanding that if they listen to God, that their victories in war come from God. Vayavo bivrit lidrosh et Adonai Elohei avotehem b'chol levavam uv'chol nafsham. As we've talked about many, many times, as we've gone through later chapters in the Tanakh, we have so many echoes of the book of Dvarim in later parts of the Tanakh, with b'chol levavam, b'chol nafsham, b'chol levavchem, b'chol nafshechem, right from the Shema prayer. They come into another covenant with God, and they are going to seek out God. And we've seen this over the course of the last number of chapters, this idea of seeking out God or not seeking out God. It talked about Rechavam not seeking out God, right? What happened with Rechavam? Like I said, he was ready to go to war, and a man of God comes to him after the secession by the northern tribes and says, don't go to war. You need to come back. And it said, but Rechavam wasn't do Reishat Hashem. He didn't go seek out God. And we're being told in these chapters very often is that you need to seek out God. So they come into a Brit, which means we're not going to ask idols. We're not going to have idols. When we have a question, when we have a problem, when we need religious instruction, we're going to go to a prophet of God. We're going to go to a Kohen. We're going to go to the Beit HaMikdash. We're going to seek out God. Man in search of God, as Heschel wrote. And anybody who would not worship the God of Israel will be put to death, whether small or great, whether man or woman. And presumably that's just not, if you didn't go, this doesn't mean if you didn't go to shul that you were given the death penalty, but rather that if you if you didn't go and if you worshipped idols, then you would get the death penalty. Now, give me a second. Like I said, my app is not working, and it took me back to chapter 1, but I'm almost back at chapter 15 to our verse. So, okay, so severe religious restrictions, not a surprise today. That sounds like, a lack of understanding and sympathy for other people's ideals and ideals. That's not what we have too much in the Tanakh. We have it's my way or the highway. Continuing in verse 14, Vayishavu la'Adonai b'kol gadol v'truah v'chatzor v'shofrot, and they take an oath with loud voices and screaming and trumpets and blasts of horn. Vayismechu chol Yudah la'shvuah ki b'chol levavam nishba'u v'chol r'tzonam bikshuhu vayimatzei lahem vayanach Adonai lahem misaviv. And the people of Judah were joyous over this oath, and they swore with all their hearts to serve God. And God responded to them and gave them respite, gave them peace on all sides. Vigam, and here we see something else. So we have this removal of idolatry, devotion to God, loyalty to God. Everybody's happy about it. It's successful. The reign is successful. Bnei Israel have peace. But Asa takes this so seriously. We see verse 16, and this is something that I believe we did have back in the book of Melachim. Vigam ma'acha eim asa melech hasira migvira asher asta la'ashera miflatzet vayichrot asa miflatzeta vayadek vayisrof benachal kidron. Asa also deposed the queen mother, his own mother. He took the rank of queen, whatever that was that she had, what seemingly, I don't know, tax exemptions or whatever it might have come with, whatever it came with bodyguards or whatever. Why? Because she made an idol, some sort of idol for the goddess Asherah. Asherah is one of the most one of the most followed idols in the ancient Near East, sort of like the female Baal Asherah, and Asa cut it down. He smashed it down. It was reduced to dust, and they burn it in the Kidron, in the Wadi Kidron. There were still shrines, and we see this. This is what it was described back in the book of Melachim over and over again. Even the good kings had a hard time getting rid of shrines, which were not necessarily idolatrous, but where people would go, and because it was far to go to the temple, and they would worship God at a shrine on a hilltop, maybe bring an animal as a sacrifice. These were not what God wanted, but generally even the good kings like Asa was not able to get rid of it. But Asa was complete with God all of his days. He brought into the house of God the things that he and his father had consecrated, silver, gold, and utensils. And there was no war until the 35th year of the reign of Asa. Things remained peaceful. So we have here Asa, description of the full purity of Asa. And again, like we've talked about many times, a big distinction between here and the account in the book of Melachim, in the book of Kings. And the big difference here, again, is all of a sudden we have this prophet, Azariah. Maybe it was prophet father and son, Azariah and Edo, or just Azariah, and it's also called Edo. There we have no prophecy. Here we have this celebration, this covenant that they come back into. We don't have that. We don't have the what inspired Asa to be a good king. Right, and there in Melachim, it's much more just about political succession. It's a shorthand. Asa was good. He got rid of idols. Here we have much more of the spiritual revival that comes here. And again, it's no surprise, because part of what we're doing in this book, again, we're showing the greatness of the kings of the Davidic dynasty, the inspiration how they became who they became, and thus it's not a big surprise that it also shares with us all of these aspects of the life of Asa, and the fact how he became the king who he became, and hoping that the people at the time of the Second Temple will continue in his ways, listen to the religious instructions of the Ezras, of the Nehemiahs, of the other great high priests, of the other great teachers, and be inspired through that inspiration, through their worship of God, through their unity, that they too will have a temple, that they will have peace, and that their temple, like the first temple, will last for a very long period of time.